A shocking number of people have asked for this video. We're going to look at all of my music crap by taking a look at my home studio and some of my guitar stuff. So since I moved into this house during the pandemic, this is a much smaller setup than I'm accustomed to. At the old house, an entire floor was dedicated to studio work. So I had a live room, I could record a full band, drums, whatever I needed to do, it was all there available to me. But these days, during the pandemic, bands are not really making albums. So I really only needed a setup where I could mix and master because that's mostly what I do these days. And then I make music for podcasts and things like that, and I make my own stuff, and I'll occasionally crank out something that I have to do, and I'll occasionally do session guitar stuff, and this setup is perfect for that, for remote sessions and things. But so we'll do guitars last and studio crap first. So I have a Universal Audio Apollo system, big fan. I have the older version, mine's a Firewire model. Really nothing to write home about, lots of us are using these. My primary preamps are Universal Audio 610s in addition to what you get with the Apollo. None of this is super crazy stuff, but it gets the job done for me. I've at various points had far more gear than this, but mostly I found that I was using the Unison preamps on the Apollo more than anything else, so I've just gone with that. And then these rack delays are from the 80s. These are Roland SDE 1000s. I have two of them so that I can run kind of a stereo thing. I really like 12-bit delays. More than any sort of modern digital delay, I really like 12-bit digital, specifically the Boss style delays, and I think these are excellent. I really like the SDE 1000s because they're still reasonably cheap. So that goes, anytime I'm using guitar delay, most of the time it's these units, or if I'm playing live, I use a DD2 usually. Then for a lot of guitar stuff, I use this Universal Audio Aux Box. It is an absolutely fantastic piece of gear. Really great. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just killer. And then sitting on top of that is my Dark Glass Alpha Omega 900 amp. I use that for most of my bass sounds. Though these are really geared towards metal, you can do just about anything with it. And I've had a lot of, vintage Ampeg stuff and really great bass amps, but I've had a lot of bass amps, vintage Ampeg stuff. You'll see one of those here today, but I just really like the way this thing works. It's super versatile. It weighs nothing, and it's 900 watts, solid state 900 watts. And then sitting up here is a Kiwi Nocturner, which yes, I do have it set up running like a piece of rack gear, which is kind of ridiculous, but there's one setting on here that I use a lot. So that's in the loop there. Down on the ground here is my bass pedal board. This will do pretty much any sort of bass session that I would need to do. It's just great stuff. Got the another Dark Glass pedal here, a Rat clone. This thing was made by Infinem. They're now defunct, one of my favorite pedal companies. Really great stuff. If you ever see any of that stuff, tell me about it because I'm always looking for more. Really great. The Moleco Bassmaster. I think this is a speaker cranker. Dirge made it. I think that's what it is. I can't remember. Phase 90, which I have a million of these script Phase 90s. I think I've got 3 or 4 of them. Boss BF2, that's another pedal that I have many multiples of just because I like it so much. Micro chorus, and then a vintage Boss CE3. Good stuff. Again, this will do just about any sound coupled with that Dark Glass amp. Inside this cabinet, a lot more pedals, tubes, strings, just anything I might need, video games, Blu-rays. And then this is my guitar studio pedal board, which is under my desk. And I know this looks batshit insane, but I like having it at my feet where I can just kick stuff on and off. It starts with a Kiwi compressor, and that moves into a Lele volume pedal. I love this volume pedal. It's fantastic. RMC10 wah. I've got one of those pedals where I've got a couple of them. Just in case I need a backup, it's one of those things that I rely on pretty frequently. This is a Fox Tone Machine clone. I think Warm Audio made that. It's the best one I've found. I've built a couple of Fox Tone Machines over the years. That's one of those pedals that I can't get away from. because I do a lot of studio work, I don't have like signature sounds or anything, but that's probably the closest to that sort of thing that you'll catch me with. Then I've got a Barber gain changer. This pedal, I don't know if it's going to stay on there permanently. I suspect it is, but it'll either be that or this Tube Screamer. I've always needed sort of low gain overdrive periodically, and I found that as cliche as it is, this circuit really does do that kind of the best. So, but the gain changer is kind of a more hi-fi version of the Tube Screamer. That's really cheapening David Barber's amazing work to call it that, but that's essentially what it'll do for your sound. Then let's see what's next in the chain. I think the Big Muff is actually next, even though you can't see it. So wow, that's really dusty. This is a Caprid from Wren and Cuff. I have just about every Wren and Cuff muff that there is. This is just my favorite one. This is a Ram's Head clone. I've also got the purple Ram's Head, but the red Ram's Head just works a little bit better for me most of the time. It's a favorite. Then next up is a power booster. Most power boosters that are made now have a master volume to make them more convenient. Unless you're using vintage amps and playing in that style, this is an incredibly inconvenient pedal. It's really not useful unless you have the right stuff to go with it. But I've got a couple of these as well. This is a pedal that I use constantly. Live rigs, studio rigs, it doesn't matter. I have to have this pedal. So Balls, they're excellent. I forget the guy's name, but he's fantastic. And he's made me a bunch of stuff over the years. And I'm really grateful to him for all his hard work. Then I think next up, is the PDF2. This is like a parametric filter that's also a drive. What I like about this is if you need a specific guitar sound to fit in a mix, you can really sort of hyper focus in on one frequency that you need to kind of make the sounds interlock. And you control it most easily, I think, with this pedal. And this thing's really stiff, so you can narrow in on exactly the frequency that you want to hyper sculpt the sound. I really, really like that. Most people will know this as the Queens of the Stone Age pedal. Josh Homme apparently has used this a lot. I don't remotely use it for the same thing that he does. I'm really using it as a tool to make my mixes work better. But because it's a parametric filter, you can also use it as like a super crazy wah if you want to. I've used it with synthesizer and a lot of other stuff. It's really, really nice. So if you need a filter, this is the best one that I know of, and I really, really like it. This has made my mixes better. I think my guitar performances are more interesting, especially if I'm doing 3 or 4 different tracks and they all have to kind of fit together. Really useful pedal. Next up is the Past Effects CE1 clone. This is, without any doubt, the best CE1 clone on the market. It has the right chip. It's just killer. There's nothing better. I use it as a drive. I use it as a chorus. It's one of my favorite pedals. It's one of the pedals that I use the most. So you've probably seen I have a lot of modulation. I play with modulation on probably 60% of the time. So I really do need all of these options. Let's see. I think the CE2 is next. That's the CE2 Wazacraft. That's probably coming off there to be replaced with the vintage CE2. It's a good pedal. It's a really, really great pedal. But I recently listened to one of my older ones next to it, and it doesn't stack up. However, if you're only going to have one chorus pedal, that's a lot more versatile than a vintage CE2, so you should probably go that route. You can see I've got another Boss BF2 there. Love those. Then I have one of the new Dimension C Wazacraft pedals. This one I love. That's just fantastic. I love that pedal. It's one of my favorites at the moment. And I recently saw that John Mayer, who I absolutely fucking hate, is using one of these, so that really sucks. Now all the John Mayer fuckers will buy these up, so that's really unfortunate, but you know, that's just the way it is sometimes. And then next up, we've got the Phase 100. Really, really, really fantastic pedal. This one was made in 1980, I think, 81, I don't know. It's one of the first year when they went to the block logo. It's pretty beat up. It's one of my favorites though. And then that's going into the Retrosonic Flanger. This is an Electric Mistress clone. It's fairly close. I think it's the best readily available one right now. I'm one of those people who really obsesses over the Electric Mistress, and there's going to be a better option available here pretty soon. I don't want to talk about it yet, but you know, well, God, I'm saying this like I'm going to do more guitar videos on the channel. Probably not, but if you leave me a comment, I'll tell you when it's out about the better option from a different company. Then we've got the Phase 45. Yes, sometimes I need all these phasers for various things. The Phase 45 is really subtle. And then the Phase 90 is my favorite modulation pedal. This is one of those things that I use constantly. I love this pedal. If I could, I would just have it on all the time. And then last of all, another infinem. This is the Driving Notion. I forget what it's based on. It's really kind of its own thing, but it's just a really, really disgusting overdrive. Really, really nasty, really strange sounding. I love it. And then I have another buffer at the end, because with all these pedals, you need a shitload of buffers. Oh yeah, and the whole pedal's on a giant pedal train, and it's powered. I'm not gonna flip it over, but it's powered by a Strymon Zuma, I think, and then two Aux, also made by Strymon, that are attached to the Zuma and powered off of it. And the reason I had to go with such a complicated power setup is a lot of these pedals are not running at 9 volts. So I needed the ability to switch between 9 and 18 volts. So like the power booster, for instance, really only sounds like a power booster if you're running it at 18 volts. So keep that in mind. Oh, one thing I forgot, my monitors on my desk. That's very important. These are Focal, what are they, CMS 50s. Now you're probably noticing I don't use any kind of like wall treatment or anything. These are just on my desk, right? That's crazy, isn't it? Well, I've used these monitors for so long. I've used these for 8 years. I could mix in a bathroom with these monitors and get a good mix. I found that I just don't need to worry about the treatment of the room once I get used to the room. It's a waste of money for me. I've done that in the past and it did not yield great returns. Now, if these were monitors that I wasn't familiar with, or I bought new monitors, yeah, I would probably have to put treatment back up. But for me using these monitors, these are great. You know, I have my chair, I crank my chair down level with them when I mix, and it works great for me. I've never had a problem. All right, so I have to use keyboards pretty often for different things. My favorite keyboard is the Korg Sv1. They've released a new version of this, but the old one is just fine. I love this thing. This is my favorite keyboard. You can use it for stage use, studio use. It has every sound you can imagine, and they're all readily accessible. There are no menus to dive through. You can just flip a knob and you're there. It has this hilarious fake tube that does nothing in there. I mean, it's a real tube, but it doesn't actually do anything for the sound, though they say it does. And then up top, I have a Moog Sub 37, which is a great synth. I also frequently use this as a controller for a bunch of my VSTs. So this thing does any lead sound that I might need, but it's not really good for pads, so I usually use VSTs for pads. VSTs have gotten really great in recent years. Oh, that's another thing we should probably talk about. I'm sure people are going to ask me about plugins. Yes, I have a lot of plugins. I have most of the Universal Audio plugins. I've got the Isotope stuff, the Slate stuff. Oh God, I can't even think of it all. It's a lot of stuff. So I rely pretty heavily on plugins these days because they've gotten excellent. They're just really, really good, and that works well for me. The VSTs I use are mostly Arturia. Love my Arturia stuff. I've got the Arturia FX collection too, which is really nice. I'm trying to think of what else on the plugin end. Oh, you guys, I'm sure will ask me about what microphones I use. I mean, right now I'm obviously not relying heavily on microphones because, you know, I'm just mixing and mastering, but I've got a lot of stuff. A lot of Mojave stuff, the usual suspects, Shure stuff. Got some custom stuff that Michael Jolie of Octava Mod made for me when he was still in business. Really good stuff, very cost effective. Just, usual stuff you'd expect to see. Nothing too incredibly high end, but it always did the job. As far as amps go, this is not remotely all of the amps that we have around, but for storage reasons, they can't all sort of be out. Just the stuff that I use regularly is kind of out and available. This Marshall is a vintage modern. This has been my main amp forever. And as you can see, it has seen some shit. It's been to a lot of states in our lovely country. It's played on a lot of records, and it's just an all-around excellent amp. I think it is one of the finest amps that Marshall ever produced. I'm definitely a Marshall person. I think that Marshalls are vintage style Marshalls, by the way, are some of the most versatile amps you can own. I really only like the sort of classic Marshall sound. I don't need much high gain, and if I do, I have pedals for that. But yeah, it runs on KT66 tubes. I think this is the 50-watt version. It's really excellent. You can see the way that I use it. I just max out the master volume and then control it, the actual volume with the detail control. And then on top of that is a vintage Ampeg B25B. This is my other amp that I lean on very heavily under normal circumstances. It's sort of a backup to the Marshall, even though they sound nothing like one another. It's really supposed to be a bass amp. I always use it as a guitar amp. It sounds amazing when you start to drive it, especially through these greenbacks. These speakers are the G12C speakers from the Jimi Hendrix reissue that they did some years ago. This amp, I don't know how many watts it is. I think it's like 60 watts or something. It is devastatingly loud, absolutely crushing. It's a really loud 60 watts, but I love this thing. I mean, it's 2 channels, and it's really just volume, treble, and bass. So turn the volume up high, the treble up high, and the bass low, and you're gonna get a really good sound. Then it's got the rocker switches, but I find those are more useful for bass than they are for guitar. But lately, I've been leaning really heavily on this Princeton. This is the Fender Chris Stapleton signature Princeton thing. It's hand wired. It's got a 12-inch speaker. Really, really great amp. I don't really know much about Chris Stapleton. I didn't buy it because I'm a fan. I just bought it because it's a hand wired Princeton at a very reasonable price, and Fender really killed it. I've played through a bunch of the originals. Wow, it sounds to me exactly like a brown face Princeton. Just absolutely fantastic. I love this amp. I've been using it constantly. You know, I'm one of those people who I'm always vacillating and moving from one amp to the other. I'm sure I'll be back on the Marshall, but for right now, this is an absolute favorite. I love this thing. It's killer, and I'm sure I'll have it for many years to come. Another amp that I forgot was in here. This is another brown face amp, though it doesn't look like it. That is a 64 Fender Concert that would have originally been in a 410 cabinet, I think. This amp is heavily modified. Somebody somewhere modified it to be almost like a Dumble inside. It was absolutely not Dumble that did it. It was, but just some random guy did that somewhere along the way. So it has a ton of gain and sounds really crazy. I'm not really a fan of the whole Dumble sound. I associate that with a lot of guitar players that I really, really don't like, but you can do some really cool stuff with that crazy amp. So I really like it. Okay, guitars. The first one we're gonna look at is my favorite. This is a Fender 52 reissue that they made, I don't know, when they were doing the ones, whatever the series was from 2012 to like 2018. Those were my favorite guitars that any company ever made. And when they discontinued them, I was crushed because I was only able to get 3 of them out of the whole set. But they were good. And you can see this thing is very well used. It was not relicked when it was purchased, but this is a guitar that, you know, I played so many gigs with this thing and played on so many records with it. And I just used it until the finish was coming off, and I regret nothing. It was worth it. And I'm sure I'll still be playing this guitar in 30 years. The pickups that are in it are made by Rewind. All the pickups that I use, unless they're stock, are made by Rewind. I love what James makes. They're the best pickups on earth as far as I'm concerned. And they're what I install in a lot of customers' guitars too. All right, first up, this is my only acoustic. I'm not really much of an acoustic player. I mean, I just have to have an acoustic because I have to play acoustic stuff sometimes, but I don't really need a range of acoustic sounds. So this is my favorite acoustic that you can buy with money. This is the J15, and yes, I know the J15 is not Gibson's most expensive acoustic, not even close, but it's got walnut back and sides and then a maple neck. It sounds really, really interesting. You can absolutely pinpoint one of these guitars when you hear it. I think the walnut is an underrated and underutilized guitar wood. It's really, really awesome. And this is one that, you know, I've done some of my usual modifications to, bone nut, bone saddle, and then I gutted the electronics because I just don't need electronics in this thing. And it sounds massive. It's super loud. Really great guitar. Next up is a SG, I think they called this the Classic, I think. This guitar was made, I think in 06, and then I got it, I think in 2012. And I've used it a lot since then. Being a big Black Sabbath fan, I've always liked the sound of an SG with P90s in it. And this thing's really versatile. Also, it's got rewind pickups in it. The bridge is not the usual bridge that you'd see on an SG Special. This has the ABR1 bridge and the associated tailpiece, which I much prefer. I think this works a lot better. It's easier to intonate, obviously. Yeah, it's really great. You can see I've customized the knobs to my liking. Oh yeah, and I changed the electronics on every guitar. The electronics that come in most things are pretty lousy, and you know, I can solder up a much better harness and stick it in there. So that goes for everything that you're going to see here. And this was my first nice guitar. This is a Heritage H140 CM. This is a really, really, really great guitar made by Heritage. Obviously, they made in the old Gibson factory. This one's made around the year 2000. I got it in 07, I think. And this is another one that's been all over the country. It's played a lot of gigs with this thing. It's a fantastic guitar. Really like it. Also got rewinds in it. These are T-top clones. Really, really nice. Here's another favorite. This is my Les Paul. It's a Les Paul traditional. That's what it started out as. I gutted it though. Everything is different except the wood and the finish. All the hardware, the pickups, the wiring. I hated everything that was stock, but it had a really fat neck, which is my preference. I'm always looking for the fattest neck possible. So I found one with a super fat neck and then just made it what I needed a guitar to be. I got it on closeout at a local store for like $1,900, so it was worth it to just pull everything out of it and make it into something really great. There's a really great set of pickups from Rewind. I don't remember what these are, but they're fantastic and they're never going to go anywhere. I don't even adjust the height or anything at this point. I've got everything like I like it, and that's how it is. Oh, I use 8-gauge strings. I know somebody's going to ask on all my electrics. That's right, I use 8s. My left arm doesn't work super great, and that makes it so that I can play for hours and not have any issues. So I make it easy on myself, and if you have appropriate technique, you can play with just about any string gauge and it will still sound good if you don't overgrip. So don't overgrip. If you overgrip, it means you're not doing it right. All right, this is another one of the vintage reissue Fenders. This one is a 72 custom style, as you can see. And this one was a factory special run. So there are not many of these. These are very hard to get, and I'm incredibly lucky to have it. This has one of the new Fender Kunifi magnet wide range humbuckers. Really, really great. The non-Kunifi ones sound like purest ass, so that's really nice. Rewind, no castery, a doodad in the bridge, custom wiring as usual. Yeah, really, really great guitar. I use this one a lot. I use all these a lot though. I don't actually, you know, for somebody who does session work, this is not the crazy number of guitars that it probably seems like. All of these serve a purpose, and if something doesn't serve a purpose, I sell it. The best Strat I've ever played. Another vintage reissue. This is the 59 Strat in Sherwood Green. Really, really great guitar. I'm serious. I've never played a better Strat. I've played some vintage ones that I like just as much, but picking this thing up was a revelation. And, you know, I work on vintage guitars all the time. They did a really good job of replicating that feel here. This is a fantastic guitar. As you can imagine, it has rewind pickups in it and custom wiring. I have it set up where the trim floats. Going back this way, I can get about a, you know, 3/4 of a step up to out of it. So that's really nice. This is my old Mustang. I think it's a 1974. This has the stock pickups in it, but they're wearing like Strat style covers. This everything's original on it. I think, yeah, even the nut's the original nut. It needs a refret at this point, but I just haven't been able to work up the courage to actually do that, because I'll be doing that myself. So that's it's weird. Like, I refret other people's guitars all the time, but it's another thing to actually do that to your own. You know, it feels weird. It's almost like I would prefer that someone else do it. It's like how if you're a doctor, you probably don't want to go doctoring on yourself, you know. But I really, really like this guitar. I mean, it's a vintage Fender. What's not to like? Everybody hates on the 70s stuff, but it's actually really great. This guitar weighs nothing. The finish is beautiful. It's just great. It sounds awesome. And now we're on to the basses. This is like 2007, I think 2006, 2008, I don't know, sometime around there, Gibson Sg Bass thingy. It's really awesome. Pickups are original. It's got new wiring in it. Really, really great. It's got round wounds on it right now, which is a big adjustment for me. I've traditionally used flat wounds, but I just wanted to try it for a while, so I put rounds on all my basses. I usually use the Labella Deep Talking Flats, they call them. Those are really great, but I'm also enjoying my rounds here. The other two basses, though, are going to shock you because they are incredibly cheap. All right, and these are my other two basses. Yeah, these are Squire Classic Vibes. Yeah, that's right. I love the Classic Vibes stuff. So Fender doesn't make direct vintage reissues anymore. They've changed the various radius options, and they don't make the right fret size, etc., etc. So if I'm going to be buying a plastic bass that feels kind of modern-y, I mean, the Squire at that point is just as good, because I'm doing fret work and nut work and electronics work to them anyway, so I just save some money. So we've got custom shop pickups in here, you know, new wiring. This is a Classic Vibe Precision bass, same thing, custom shop pickups, custom wiring. These are amazing, amazing basses, and I use them constantly. Okay, just because I knew people were gonna kill me if I didn't do it, I pulled out all the other pedals too. So starting at this end, we've got a Kiwi Java Boost. This is one of the older ones. It's an OC with the OC44 in it. This is an old school treble booster. This only works through a cranked amp. You can't just buy this and sort of run it through your bedroom setup. I use this with the Ampeg or the Marshall, and it's fantastic. Then we've got for the Past Effects Phase 5, which is a clone of the Roland Phase 5. Really, really great pedal if you like the Roland Phase 5. The Past Effects Preamp Crunch. This is just the preamp from the CE1. So that's really, really excellent to just have that isolated. No chorus there, just that weird crunchy flavor. I really like that. Also a Past Effects Jet Phaser. It's a clone of the Roland Jet Phaser. And as with all the other Past Effects stuff, it's the best one that I know of. Late 70s Ibanez AD9 analog delay. Really, really great analog delay. I don't really use analog delay very much, but when I do, I think this is the best one around, so it's the one I like to use. More Wren and Cuff stuff. This is the blue ram's head or violet ram's head. Just another version of the Caprid. The Wren and Cuff Box of War. In the big box, this was a special edition this year. It's like a the so-called Civil War Sovtek Big Muff. Really, really great. Dig the Russian Big Muff thing. Archer, you know, I don't like the Klon enough to own a Klon, but I do still like the Klon, so the Archer is a great alternative there. Metal Zone, because sometimes I do play metal. The Boss Digital Metalizer. This is a vintage pedal. This I really just use as an overdrive / chorus. Really excellent. I use it a lot. SD1, one of my first pedals. Really, really great pedal. It's like 40 bucks new or whatever. Boss Super Chorus, another pedal I had really early on. And then 3 vintage Boss digital delays. These 2 are the digital sampler. This is the more traditional DD3. I'm not sure which I prefer. The actual delay part sounds the same, and usually I'm using the SDE1000s, those rack units these days, but I just pick one of these and throw it on whatever board. It works great. Vintage HM2. I'm glad to see they're making the HM2 again. Really, really great pedal. This is my, like if I'm doing metal, which does occasionally happen, this is my primary sound, this into the Marshall. It sounds so disgustingly nasty. It is the worst sound in the world, in the best way possible. A DS1, this was my sort of like main distortion pedal in the years before I realized that I preferred just like a really big amp cranked. That was what I was using. Blues Driver, I don't even remember where this thing came from. I use it from time to time. This is something I haven't had that long. This is an RMC Grey Wah clone that Joffrey made for me. It's not something you see very often. Joffrey doesn't do a lot of custom work, but RMC makes my favorite wahs. Several people have told me that he doesn't do custom work and this doesn't exist, yet here it is in front of you. It's fantastic. It's a really, really accurate recreation of the Grey Wah and all of the problems that come with that. That is a very specific sound. You either like it or you hate it. I fall into the like it camp for sure. Sonic Research Turbo Tuner. I have a bunch of tuners. This is my favorite one because it works a lot like the strobe tuner that I use when I'm doing guitar repair work. So really like this. This is my favorite tuner that I've found thus far. Kiwi El Rey, which is supposed to make like a Marshall-y sound. I just use it to boost an already crunchy amp. That's a really, really great pedal. That's some kind of special edition. Fantastic option. Vintage CE2. This is the one that helped me to realize that I didn't like the Wazacraft CE2 quite as much as I thought I did. A couple of Hartman Fuzzes. These are the same BC 108 fuzz face clone. One of them has some kind of volume mod done to it, so it hits the front of the amp harder. This is an Octave Fuzz, an Octavia clone. Really, really great. This is the Electro Harmonix Russian Big Muff reissue. This is a fantastic pedal, really cheap. I don't like it quite as much as I like the Wren and Cuff, but this is also sort of doing a different variety of Russian Big Muff. The classic Distortion Plus, use that occasionally. These are Past Effects prototypes. I think Burley is sort of making these intentionally look like the now defunct Buffalo FX pedals. Buffalo did not depart the industry on very good terms, and it's good to see these designs coming back in a way that people can afford them. So, because they were getting really pricey on the used market. So this one, I think, is kind of like the Buffalo FX Evolution, which was a Cornish G2 clone, I think. So this is a great sort of distortion-y, muffy, ratty kind of thing. I really like it. Do you some good Pink Floyd. This is a clone of the TDX, I think, by Buffalo FX, which was like a tube driver clone, but it had an IC replacing the tube. So if you need a tube driver, you don't want to deal with all the other shit that comes with having a tube driver, this is a great option. I really like it. It's fantastic. It'll also do a good Gilmore-y sound. Not my favorite era of Gilmore, but still really, really great. Then we've got a Kiwi Red Dirt Germanium, which is based on the Tube Screamer, but it has a fuck ton more gain. Another one of my Balls power boosters in a different case. I use that pedal so much I have to have backups. And this is another Balls here. This is a Tonebender Mark II clone with some germanium transistors that Balls selected for me. This is a really, really great pedal if you need a tone bender. I really like it. This was a one-off, but he'll do that for you. He'll make you kind of whatever you need. A Digitech Whammy DT. This is one of those weird pedals that you don't use all the time, but when you need it for a certain thing, it's the only thing that will do that. So got to have that. This is a really, really useful pedal, and it's gotten me out of some jams before on certain things. So I really, really like this pedal. It's a problem solver. If I need a sound to fit in some kind of weird niche in a mix, yeah, this will probably get me there if the parametric filter doesn't. And last of all is the Kiwi Caverns. This is one of my favorite delay reverb combos. This is in the special edition black case. It's super snazzy. It's a digital delay. It sounds like an analog delay, and it's got a couple different reverb modes. They're in other places right now, so I can't show you, but I have a lot of the digital Kiwi reverb stuff. I just really like their algorithm. So you're probably noticing that I don't have any like Strymon stuff or anything like that. I've had all of that stuff over the years, and I prefer these sort of isolated units that do one specific thing really well than having a couple of units that do everything, because there's a sort of sameness that ends up coming with those other systems. In the past, I needed to have that because I was taking the things on the road, and the Strymons, they do solve a problem and make that easier. But I don't want to sound like a worship leader, and that's what ends up happening with those pedals. They make everybody just sound like the same worship leader, and that's not what I do. We hail Satan in this house. But seriously, I prefer these isolated units that let me sound a little bit more unique. It's like if you want to deploy a flavor, you want to deploy a very specific flavor. So you may as well just have the pedal that the other unit is emulating if you have the ability to. And since this is my job, I can have a million different pedals that do all kinds of different shit, and that's fine. And I still have my big boards that have all the units on them, and my very, very, very worn rug down there. All right, I know this was incredibly long and masturbatory, but remember, a shocking number of you asked for this. So I apologize if this is not what you wanted to see from this channel. Odds are good it's not what you wanted, but here it is. And so now you've seen all my music shit. The only exception is I have stuff that's in other places. I have a lot more amps than this that I can't get to at the moment. And also the pedal situation is kind of in constant flux. I'm always getting new pedals. But I hope you like this. I hope this isn't just the most boring shit you've ever watched in your life. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I will talk to you soon. Good night.